So our article was in Forbes at the end of October, and it's titled Upskilling Leaders is Essential in the New World of Work. Now, if you caught last week's show, you know that Joey and I also chatted about what topics we would include if you were to do a one-day training for managers. So I thought that this article was timely. One of the items in this article was that 50% of learning and development programs in 2022 are actually focused on leadership and management training. So I'm going to pause there and ask Joey, what do you think of that stat?
So if you also recall from the last episode that we did, I talked about getting a baseline expectation. If we were to do a one-day manager training, what would that look like? And I believe that people really need a baseline expectation of what does it mean to be a manager. And so to hear that 50% of all training is leadership and development, it tells me, or I would gather two things from that. One, I think that there's obviously a captive market because people need to step into leadership and step into management. And so having tools that help them are great. But also it makes me feel like maybe more companies are operating at a deficit than we really, really are honest about. Because if half of all training is about leadership and management, that isn't the same type of breakdown in a typical organization where half of the team members have leadership capacities and the other half do not. In addition to that, it also tells me that maybe we are investing so heavily in the training of individuals who are already in a leadership role that we might be neglecting incredible independent contributors or folks who don't have a leadership role that may in their exit interview say they're going on to get opportunities for growth and development. So I look at it from a couple of ways. But that's very interesting. I was very shocked to see that stat in the article, that 50%.
I was too. And, anything that has the word upskilling in the title is going to catch my attention, similar to other trendy terms that we've seen pop up. It's really nothing new. It's just called something new. I mean, it's talking about development, right? Developing your leaders. But I think upskilling is a term that has caught a lot of attention because there has been a focus in organizations, primarily due to a highly competitive labor market, where this concept of upskilling, looking at your existing workforce and finding ways to actually help them build the skills that you need for the growth and roles within your organization, as opposed to looking outward. So, I think that organizations should have been doing this all along, but I think it's become more of a necessity lately. And in summarizing some of the points of this article, the question that I asked myself is like, well, why? Like, why now? Like, why is this happening? And it's primarily because with this significant shift we've seen over the last few years to fully remote or hybrid work, it's not the same type of leadership and management that most of us have experienced in the past. So it kind of makes sense to me that there's this renewed focus on leadership and development, and that it's primarily due to the shift of like how we're working and managing our teams.
Yeah, but do you think for a little bit that maybe this could be what I would consider like leadership porn, in the sense that we could be so obsessed about the topic of leadership that we fail to tackle the topics that people really and truly need head on. And we think about this overarching, almost motivational or inspiring aspect of becoming a leader without the drill down that we covered last episode about effective one-on-ones, getting buy-in from your team, staying in the context of the law. Like
Right.
these are topics that aren't as sexy, so to speak, but those are the ones that actually move organizations forward. And so I wonder because I've got friends who will binge a leadership podcast or will take leadership training, but then will go back to work and there's nowhere for them to exhibit those skills and that they've learned because their work culture is just like entirely different. Um, so I don't know. Just to play devil's advocate for a bit, I think some of it might be aspirational training without practical application for where people are.
Well, it's definitely difficult to say. I think that, referencing again the article and what some companies have been working on through this training, it does make sense to me that it's become uh, more prevalent this year. We talked about kind of that remote and hybrid work shift. I think some managers have an easier and just kind of natural ability to make the adjustments necessary, and I think they're just more intuitive and they can figure it out. But you and I know, Joey, like really just depending on employees to just figure it out as a leader isn't a successful recipe. And one of the other items that this training has commonly had a renewed focus on is that concept of like how to foster inclusion and belonging and how to make your remote teams feel connected when you're not gathering in person and how to be inspired. So I think, managers can definitely use help in these areas. But to your point, Joey, if they don't have the foundation of the training that we talked about in our last episode, honestly, I'm not confident that any of this, kind of more warm and fuzzy training is going to do them any good.
Yeah, and before you send someone to a training, uh, you want to make sure that if there is an intentional conversation, at least there's an understanding of what are the gaps in the organization, what are the gaps in their role or skill, and gaps don't mean deficiencies. They don't always mean deficiencies. It can mean opportunities, right? For example, mentioned last week, one of our members of our team recently got certified as a disc coach, right? So that's an opportunity for us that we didn't have within our organization. And we also recently brought on a Scrum Master, and that's an opportunity that we have had historically in the organization, but had gone a little bit without. So think about how a training will impact your organizational strategy, and then that will help make sure that when a person comes back, they're able to plug in and utilize what they've learned, and truly upskill instead of be stagnant.
Well, I think it was a great topic to chat about. I appreciate that Forbes highlighted, this surprising stat that I don't think any of us saw coming. In fact, gosh, it's been almost a year. But I remember when we started the pod, we had actually had a discussion about the lack of training, and we referenced some of the stats about how the vast majority of managers have never been provided any sort of managerial training. So I'm glad to see that there's uh, a focus on it now, and hopefully it will be going into future years.